The silent Armada slipped through the darkness like a ghost, its sleek ships moving as one, undetectable by the Empire's most advanced detection systems. For years, Earth had built its fleet in secret, laying the groundwork for the moment when it would strike. That moment had arrived. The first target, the Empire's supply line running through the Korath system, a crucial passage for military and civilian resources alike. Admiral Kira Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship Eclipse, watching the stars streak by as they approached their target. Her heart beat steadily in her chest, but her mind was a whirl of calculations, each one more intricate than the last. The plan had been set in motion years ago, but now it was real. The first strike would set the tone for the entire war. Earth's enemies would learn that their empire could be taken down piece by piece, starting with the unseen. "Admiral," Sam O'Connor's voice cut through the silence, pulling her from her thoughts. "We're approaching the first target. The Korath supply lines are in range." "Proceed," Hayes replied, her voice cold, composed. The crew moved in synchrony, their roles honed by months of intense preparation. This was no longer a mission, it was an execution. The fleet, silent and invisible, moved into position, surrounding the vulnerable supply convoy. No one saw them. The Empire's ships, lumbering through space with their massive shields raised and weapons ready, had no idea what was about to hit them. The silent Armada's technology was far superior, designed not only for stealth but for precision. A single strike could cripple the convoy, shutting down the entire supply chain for months. A flicker of motion, barely noticeable even to the most observant eye, marked the first strike, the first of many silent missiles launched from the Eclipse, tearing through space with deadly accuracy. They struck without warning, taking out the lead ship in the convoy with surgical precision. The explosion was minimal, just enough to disable the ship's engines and rendering it useless. The rest of the convoy had no idea what had happened. No alarms blared, no warning signs flashed. They continued on their path, unaware that half of their fleet had already been neutralized. Then, in perfect synchrony, the remaining ships in the silent Armada struck. Railguns fired in unison, cutting through enemy hulls as if they were butter. Missiles detonated with pinpoint accuracy, creating a chain reaction of explosions that tore apart the convoy's remaining defenses. Not a single shot was fired in retaliation. The Empire's vessels, their massive hulls slowly starting to drift in the void, never knew what hit them. "Targets neutralized," Sam's voice echoed through the command deck. "The convoy is destroyed. We've left no survivors." "Good," Hayes replied, her face unreadable. "Now we vanish." Without hesitation, the silent Armada disengaged. The fleet moved as swiftly as it had arrived, cloaking itself once more in the black of space. No one had seen them. No one had heard them. The Empire would be left to search for an enemy they would never find. The aftermath of the strike rippled through the Empire's command structure. Within hours, the Korath system was in chaos. The Empire's military was thrown into disarray as their supply line, critical to their ongoing campaigns, was severed. Panic began to spread. How could such a precise attack happen without warning? How could they have missed it? The Empire's high command scrambled to formulate a response, but their efforts were in vain. The silent Armada had already vanished, leaving only the smoldering wreckage of their first victory. As Hayes sat in her command chair, a faint smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. The first strike was a success, but this was just the beginning. The Empire was blind, and Earth's fleet was ready to exploit that blindness to its fullest extent. "We'll hit them again," she murmured, eyes gleaming with resolve. "And next time, they won't even know we were here." The silent Armada had made its mark, and the Empire would soon learn that silence was the deadliest weapon of all. As the fleet's ships disappeared into the vastness of space, leaving the broken convoy behind, Admiral Hayes remained unfazed. Their first strike had been flawless, surgical, silent, and devastating. Yet it wasn't enough. this was only a taste of what was to come. The Empire had no idea how thoroughly their defenses had been compromised, and Earth's fleet wasn't finished. The Silent Armada had sent its message, but there was more to be done. "We've struck hard," Sam O'Connor said, his voice steady but with an edge of exhilaration. "But the Empire's not going to let this slide. They'll hunt us down, Admiral. The question is, how long can we stay hidden?" Hayes leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping the armrest, each beat deliberate, controlled. "We've planned for that, Sam. They won't catch us, not unless we want them to." The bridge was quiet, save for the hum of the ship's systems and the soft chatter of crew members relaying updates. The Eclipse was already on its course, heading for the next strike point. Hayes knew their stealth tactics would keep them hidden for a while, but it was only a matter of time before the Empire began to piece together the attack pattern. Her mind flickered to the bigger picture. Earth's fleet had spent years in the shadows, hidden in asteroid fields, cloaked in nebulae, or simply buried among the many unnoticed ships passing through the galaxy. Every move had been calculated, every battle tested. The Silent Armada was not a conventional military force. It was a weapon of precision, a tool for crippling the Empire's power one blow at a time. They had set the stage, but now it was time to escalate. "Time to make them think twice," Hayes muttered to herself. She turned to Sam, who was already reviewing the next target on his tactical screen. The supply lines in the Fentis system. It's a major route for reinforcements and resources, and it's lightly defended. "The Fentis system." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Are we sure about this? It's risky. The Empire might expect us to target something more obvious." Hayes smirked. "That's exactly why we're going there. Let them think they've learned our playbook." The Silent Armada wasn't just about striking hard. It was about creating confusion. The Empire would think they had figured out the pattern of their attacks, only for Earth's fleet to strike in an entirely unexpected location. It was psychological warfare, making the enemy question everything they thought they knew about Earth's capabilities. As the Eclipse moved into position, Hayes couldn't help but reflect on how much humanity had accomplished in secret. What had once been a planet on the verge of collapse, fighting off extinction, was now leading the charge against one of the most powerful empires the galaxy had ever seen. Earth's ingenuity and determination had made the impossible possible. The ships were cloaked again, invisible in the blackness of space as they entered the outskirts of the Fentis system. It was still early, and the Empire ships had yet to fully secure the system. Now was the time to strike, swift, merciless, and without warning. "Ready the weapons," Hayes ordered, her voice low but commanding. "Target their supply stations. We'll take out their logistical support first. We'll hit them where they're most vulnerable." Sam nodded, his fingers flying over the controls as he initiated the first volley of coordinated attacks. The first few shots, fired from the Eclipse's railguns, tore into the enemy's orbiting supply station, cutting through shields as though they were paper. Explosions erupted in quick succession, the station shuddering before breaking apart entirely. It was only a matter of moments before the second station fell, and then the third. The Empire's reinforcements were now cut off, their resources dwindling, their ability to respond severely compromised. Hayes watched the destruction unfold, her expression unreadable. This wasn't just an attack. This was a statement. Earth was no longer the helpless underdog. Humanity had the power to cripple entire fleets without a single shot fired in retaliation. "Report," Hayes said softly. Sam's eyes flicked to his console. "All targets neutralized. The Fentis supply chain is in total disarray. The Empire won't recover from this anytime soon." The silence that followed was deafening. For a brief moment, the crew allowed themselves to absorb the magnitude of their success. But Hayes knew better than anyone. This war was far from over. What had begun as a series of isolated strikes would soon turn into something much larger, much more dangerous. The Empire would respond, but Earth's silent armada would strike again before they ever saw it coming. "Prepare for the next target," Hayes ordered, her voice steady as ever. "We're just getting started." The Fentis system had been a success, but as Hayes stared at the screens in front of her, she knew that their victory had only momentarily shifted the balance of power. The Empire was resilient, and its response would come in time. It always did. But for now, Earth's fleet was untouchable, moving like shadows through the galaxy. The Silent Armada was a myth to their enemies, an enemy that could strike anywhere and yet remain unseen. That terror, that uncertainty would be their greatest weapon. "Admiral," Sam O'Connor's voice cut through the quiet tension on the bridge. "The Empire has responded. They've launched a series of countermeasures throughout the system. We've detected several high-level interceptors moving toward our last position." Hayes' lips curled into a faint smile, her fingers tracing the map that lit up before her. The Empire's response was predictable. They were beginning to understand that the Silent Armada was not a random strike, but a well-planned campaign. The Empire would soon deploy more sophisticated detection methods, hoping to catch the fleet off guard. But Earth's fleet was already prepared for this. They had known the Empire would retaliate. "Have we made the jump yet?" Hayes asked. "Just about," Sam confirmed, his hands moving quickly over the console. "All ships are cloaked, and we've initiated the jump to the Tyrannus sector." The Eclipse and the rest of the fleet moved as one, vanishing into the depths of space once more. It was a seamless transition, the momentary disappearance of their ships like ghosts fading into thin air. The interceptors, dispatched with full confidence, would be left to wander the empty silence of the void, searching for a fleet that had already moved far beyond their reach. The Silent Armada had once again executed its signature move, vanishing without a trace. "Where to next?" Sam asked, his voice calm but with an underlying edge of anticipation. "We target the Empire's communications relay in the Tyrannus sector," Hayes replied, her eyes narrowing. "We cripple their ability to coordinate across their fleets. If they can't communicate, they'll be blind." The relay station was a vital part of the Empire's control over its far-reaching empire, and without it, their ships would lose their communication network, and their command centers would descend into chaos. It was a crucial part of Earth's next move, and this time, they would strike faster than ever before. As the fleet entered the Tyrannus sector, their cloaking systems activated once again, hiding them from the prying eyes of the Empire. The station was not heavily guarded, but the Empire had set up a perimeter to prevent attacks from unknown forces. Hayes knew the moment would come where they would need to go deeper into enemy territory, but this strike would give them the upper hand. The first missile launched from the Eclipse, its trajectory perfect, cutting through the blackness of space toward the communications relay. The first explosion was silent, nothing but a blip in the cosmic ocean as the station's primary reactor went up in flames. It was an immediate and calculated strike, followed by another wave of railgun blasts that shattered the relay's secondary systems. "All communications are down," Sam reported, a rare smile playing on his lips. "They won't be able to coordinate or call for reinforcements. The Tyrannus sector is ours." Hayes leaned back in her chair, a moment of satisfaction flooding her. She wasn't just striking at the Empire's military. She was disassembling its very ability to function. With each successful attack, the Empire's grip loosened and Earth's power grew. The Empire would soon realize that its once unshakable hold was crumbling under the weight of these calculated, invisible assaults. "We have the advantage," Hayes said softly. "Let's press it." The Silent Armada began its retreat into the deep reaches of space, disappearing once more before the Empire could send in reinforcements. In the aftermath of the attack, confusion and panic rippled through the Empire's ranks. They couldn't find their enemies, and now they couldn't communicate with each other. Earth had struck again, and the Empire was no closer to understanding how or why. The Silent Armada's power was no longer a rumor, it was a growing nightmare for the Empire. And this was only the beginning. The galaxy would soon tremble as the Silent Armada moved from one target to the next, dismantling the Empire piece by piece, one strike at a time. The chaos that followed the destruction of the Tyrannus communications relay rippled throughout the Empire like a seismic shock. For the first time in years, their fleets were disoriented, unable to respond with the swiftness and coordination that had once been their hallmark. Hayes knew this confusion wouldn't last long. Eventually, the Empire would regroup. But for now, Earth's Silent Armada had seized the initiative, and that was all that mattered. The Eclipse was now stationed in a hidden asteroid belt on the edge of the Lintha system. Hayes and her command staff were gathered in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays of the galaxy. The fleet's next move was critical, and time was running out. The Empire would soon deploy new tactics to counteract their cloaking technology, and it was only a matter of time before they adapted. "We've disrupted their communication, but it's not enough," Hayes said, her voice steady, but tinged with the weight of the decision she was about to make. "We need to hit them where it hurts the most, at their heart." Sam O'Connor, always the pragmatist, didn't hesitate. The core worlds, Admiral, they're heavily fortified. A direct assault would be suicide. Hayes' eyes narrowed. "We're not attacking them directly. We'll strike at their supply routes. If we cripple their ability to resupply, their fleets will become useless. The Empire's strength is its logistics. If we take that away, we leave them weak, vulnerable." A series of coordinates and calculations flickered on the holoscreen, marking key points along the Empire's primary supply routes. The Empire's vast trade networks kept its war machines fueled and operational. The Silent Armada would hit the most critical sectors, causing massive disruption. They would make sure the Empire never knew where or when the next blow would land. "Target the Zorath system," Hayes continued. "It's a major supply hub for the Empire's central fleets. If we sever their connection to the Outer Rim, it'll send shockwaves through their entire infrastructure." Sam nodded, his face grave. "Understood, but we'll need to be quick. We're not the only ones watching the Zorath system. They've already fortified the area, and we can expect heavy resistance." "We're not here to fight," Hayes said firmly. "We're here to break them, and we will." With the plan set in motion, the fleet began its silent journey toward the Zorath system, cloaked in darkness. They had perfected the art of moving undetected, using every trick in their arsenal to avoid detection. The Empire's high-tech scanners were no match for the Silent Armada's stealth tactics. They would slip in, strike hard, and vanish before the Empire even knew what had happened. As the fleet approached the outskirts of Zorath, Hayes surveyed the holographic map before her. The supply station was positioned within the asteroid field of the system's outer rim, a seemingly impregnable fortress. But it was vulnerable to a well-timed strike, an opening the Silent Armada would exploit. "Deploy the assault drones," Hayes commanded. "We'll strike from multiple vectors. Use the terrain to our advantage." The drones, small but heavily armed, launched from the Eclipse and the other ships in the fleet. They darted through the asteroid belt, a swarm of silent predators, blending with the debris and darkness. They were nearly invisible to the enemy's sensors, and their speed made them difficult to track. Within minutes, the first wave of drones reached the supply station. Simultaneously, a series of railgun shots fired from the Eclipse, targeting the station's vulnerable reactor core. The first shot hit its mark, triggering a cascade of explosions. The station's shields faltered, and the drones moved in for the kill. Another volley of railgun blasts shattered the station's hull, while the drones launched devastating EMP pulses, disabling the station's remaining defenses. It was quick, precise, and merciless. "All supply lines are cut," Sam reported. "Zorath is crippled. The Empire's fleets won't have resupply for weeks." A sense of satisfaction settled over the command crew, But Hayes knew this victory was just another step in a much larger war. The Empire would not lie down easily. They would retaliate, and the Silent Armada would need to be ready for whatever came next. "Prepare for the retreat," Hayes ordered. "We're done here. No trace, no evidence." As the fleet vanished into the darkness once again, Hayes couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. What began as a small band of rebels had grown into a powerful, invisible force that was shaking the foundations of the Empire. And this was just the beginning. The Empire would learn that Earth's Silent Armada was not a force to be underestimated. They were the storm before the calm, the shadow before the strike. And when the final blow came, the Empire would not see it coming. The stars seemed distant, cold, as the Silent Armada slipped once more into the blackness of space, leaving the crippled Zorath system behind them. Hayes stood before the viewing port on the Eclipse, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes scanning the expanse. It had been a successful strike, but the weight of their actions was starting to settle in. The Empire was reeling, but its fury would come. And when it did, it would not go unanswered. "Admiral," Sam O'Connor's voice broke through the silence. "The Empire is deploying forces to the Yelroth system. We've intercepted comms indicating an aggressive push toward the border. They're hunting us." Hayes didn't flinch. "Good. Let them. We'll let them think they have the advantage. We strike again. Only this time, we make sure they never find us." The time for subtlety was ending. The Silent Armada had struck at the Empire's heart, hurt them where it would do the most damage. But now the Empire was starting to realize that it wasn't just a few isolated attacks. They were up against something much larger, something elusive. Earth's fleet, moving without warning, became a specter to haunt their every decision. "Shall we move on the Yelroth system?" Sam asked, his tone serious. Hayes shook her head. "No, let them waste resources searching for ghosts. We're heading deeper into their territory. We hit the core worlds." A ripple of concern ran through the room. The core worlds were the very foundation of the Empire, a place heavily fortified, both militarily and politically. Striking here would bring them closer to the center of the Empire's power than ever before. "We don't have the numbers for a sustained engagement with their fleets in the core," Sam warned. "They're too well defended." "I don't intend to engage," Hayes replied coldly. "We're going to destabilize the power base itself." The room fell quiet as the plan began to form. The Empire's core worlds were not only militarily crucial, but also the hubs of their political control. By taking out their key infrastructure, they would be left with nothing but fragile alliances and a demoralized populace. Hayes had already gathered enough intel to target their communication hubs, their banking systems, and their planetary defense fleets. If they could sever the Empire's control over the people in the core, they would create a galaxy-wide crisis. "We infiltrate," Hayes continued, her eyes glinting with determination. "We'll sabotage their most sensitive systems, everything they rely on to maintain control. Their fleets, their governments, everything." The next few days were a blur of preparations as the Silent Armada set its course toward the core worlds. The fleet had grown in strength, with more ships added as the alliance with Earth's scattered colonies deepened. They were no longer just Earth's silent defenders. They were the galaxy's last hope. The first strike hit the Callian system, home to the Empire's central financial hub. Without warning, the Eclipse and her accompanying fleet slipped through the enemy's defenses, using cloaking technology and high-speed drones to bypass their outer defenses. As they hit the financial exchanges, the Empire's stockpile of resources plummeted, causing a ripple effect across their entire economy. Panic began to spread, but there would be no time for the Empire to recover. As the attacks continued, the crew of the Eclipse moved like shadows, leaving behind crippled systems in their wake. The banks, the government servers, the communications networks, all fell silent as Earth's fleet moved like ghosts through the very heart of the Empire. On the bridge, Hayes watched the chaos unfold through the tactical displays. The Empire's heart was bleeding, and they didn't even know where the wound was. The central systems are in disarray, Sam reported. They've lost control of their communication nodes. No way to organize a proper counterattack. Perfect, Hayes said, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. They can't coordinate. They can't fight back. Not yet. But Hayes knew the calm before the storm. The Empire would not be defeated by mere sabotage, no matter how crippling. The real battle was yet to come. They had made their mark. Now the question was whether the Empire could recover, or if Earth's silent armada would finish what they started. As the fleet made its retreat, once again disappearing into the vastness of space, Hayes could sense the tension mounting. The Empire would soon know they were no longer invincible. The silent armada was a force unlike any they had encountered, and soon it would be time for them to face the consequences. Prepare for the next strike, Hayes ordered. The real fight is coming. We've only just begun. The silence of space felt heavier now, laden with the consequences of the silent armada's escalating campaign. The Empire, once thought invincible, was now on the edge of collapse. The strikes against their infrastructure had left their core worlds fractured and their fleets in disarray. But Hayes knew the Empire was not finished yet. This was the beginning of their retaliation, not the end. A sudden flash of red illuminated the command deck of the Eclipse, signaling an incoming message. Hayes turned sharply, her fingers already moving to the interface. A hologram of Sam O'Connor appeared, his expression grim. "Admiral, the Empire has regrouped faster than we anticipated. They're assembling a task force in the Phaedra system. It's not just a counterattack, it's an all-out assault." Hayes' mind raced. Phaedra was located near the central trade lanes, a vital route for both military and commercial traffic. If the Empire launched a full-scale assault there, they could regain their strategic foothold and stifle any further resistance. The Silent Armada could not let that happen. "Can we intercept before they mobilize?" she asked, her voice unwavering. "We're already en route," Sam replied, his tone determined. "We've been able to stay off their sensors so far, but their fleets are becoming more adept at countering our stealth technology. We'll have to move fast." "Then we move now," Hayes ordered, her voice cold and precise. "Prepare for a tactical strike. Let them think we're weak. We're not here to engage. We're here to disrupt." The plan was set into motion. The Silent Armada, once an invisible force, had become an enigma to the Empire, a puzzle they could never quite solve. Hayes would use that perception to her advantage. She wasn't about to meet the Empire's challenge head-on. Instead, she would lure them into a trap. As the fleet approached the Phaedra system under the cover of darkness, Hayes stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the cold expanse of the stars. The Empire's task force was still in the outer reaches, unaware of the impending storm. The Eclipse and her accompanying ships slipped into position, hiding among the debris of an old mining colony. "We wait," Hayes said, her gaze fixed on the fleet's movements. "Let them come to us." Time stretched out like a thin thread, the minutes feeling like hours. The Empire's task force slowly closed the distance, unaware of the Silent Armada lying in wait. Hayes knew they were growing impatient, their fleets eager to strike. The longer they waited, the more the Empire would push forward, believing their superiority to be their greatest weapon. Finally, the trap was sprung. The Empire's 1st Battalion entered the mining belt, their scanners sweeping across the system, looking for any sign of resistance. It was then that the Eclipse and the rest of the fleet moved in, cloaked and silent, like specters of vengeance. The first strike was a calculated one, railgun blasts fired from multiple angles, tearing through the unsuspecting Imperial ships before they could react. The Eclipse's long-range EMP pulses disabled the lead vessels, sending them into disarray. Simultaneously, smaller strike ships, hidden in the asteroid fields, emerged to finish the job. They swooped in like predatory birds, obliterating vital power sources and knocking out their communications. For a moment, chaos reigned. The Empire's fleet was caught off guard, their coordination shattered. Hayes could feel the moment of uncertainty. This was the opening they needed, but she was not about to take unnecessary risks. "We hit fast, and we hit hard," Hayes barked. "No unnecessary engagements. Let them think they're winning until it's too late." The silent Armada moved like a shadow, slipping in and out of the enemy's reach, using the debris and dust clouds of the mining field to their advantage. Each hit was a precise surgical strike, targeting the enemy's weapon systems, their engines, and their communication arrays. The Empire's forces retaliated, but their efforts were scattered and ineffective, lacking the coordination that had once made them so formidable. "Target the command ship," Hayes ordered as a massive Imperial dreadnought emerged from the debris field, its guns powered up and ready to fire. The Eclipse maneuvered into position, launching a series of decoy drones to confuse the enemy's targeting systems. The Empire's ship, momentarily distracted, fired on the wrong targets. This gave the Eclipse the opening it needed. Two devastating railgun shots struck the dreadnought's bridge, incapacitating its command crew and throwing the vessel into disarray. "Target neutralized," Sam reported, a note of satisfaction in his voice. With their command structure fractured, the remaining Imperial ships began to retreat, scrambling to regroup. The silent Armada moved quickly, ensuring the Empire's forces were not allowed to recover. As the battle drew to a close, Hayes surveyed the aftermath. The Empire's once proud task force was crippled, their losses significant. But this victory came at a cost. They had drawn the Empire's attention, and soon they would bring reinforcements from across the galaxy. "We've bought time, but not much," Hayes murmured. "Prepare the fleet for a rapid withdrawal. We move before they can regroup." As the fleet slipped back into the shadows, once more unseen by the Empire, Hayes knew the silent Armada's time of stealth was drawing to a close. The real war had just begun. The tension aboard the Eclipse was palpable. The victory in the Phaedra system had given the silent Armada a temporary advantage, but it was only a reprieve. Hayes knew it was a fleeting one. The Empire, though wounded, would retaliate with a vengeance, and Earth's fleet could only remain a shadow for so long. Their time in the dark was running out. The Eclipse jumped into deep space, making the final preparations for what Hayes called the final gambit. The Empire's forces had been thrown into chaos, but there was still one thing they valued above all else: control. If Earth's fleet could sever their grip on the galaxy's most vital resource hub, the war would shift irreversibly. The Empire would be forced to fight for survival, not dominance. "You're sure this will work?" Sam O'Connor's voice came through the comm, a touch of skepticism in his tone. "The Empire's outer fleets are already redeployed. They'll have us outgunned if we engage head-on." "We're not engaging head-on, Sam," Hayes replied. Her voice was calm, almost detached. "We're going for the heart of their economy. The Hyros Nexus is their lifeline. If we can sever that, the Empire will collapse in on itself." The Hyros Nexus was a network of mining colonies, trade routes, and vital resource extraction points controlled by the Empire. It was the foundation of their war machine and their economy. If they could cripple this nexus, the Empire would be forced to divert all its resources into survival, and their fleets would be left vulnerable. The fleet's stealth capabilities had given them the element of surprise in previous encounters, but this would be their boldest strike yet. The Nexus was a heavily fortified system, surrounded by an array of defense stations, orbital mines, and battle cruisers. They would need every bit of ingenuity and firepower they had to breach its outer defenses. Hayes stood on the bridge, her fingers tracing the outlines of the tactical display. The entire fleet had been prepared for this moment. There was no turning back now. "Deploy all scout drones," Hayes ordered. "We need eyes on the Nexus before we make our move. and get me a real-time feed from the Shadowhawk and Blackthorn. The fleet's smaller ships, swift and deadly, were already moving into position, the drones spreading out across the outer rim of the Hyros Nexus, feeding vital data back to the Eclipse. The reports began to flood in, showing a system that was far more fortified than expected. It wasn't just the usual defenses. This time, the Empire had deployed advanced countermeasures, including a network of autonomous sentinels capable of detecting cloaked vessels. "They've adapted," Sam said, his voice a mix of admiration and caution. "It's going to be harder to get close than we thought." Hayes clenched her jaw, her mind racing. It had been a gamble, but it was the only one that could work. The Empire's forces were spread thin across multiple fronts, and if they failed here, it would signal the end of the silent Armada. Earth's forces couldn't sustain a prolonged fight against a united empire. "We don't have time to play games," Hayes said, her tone hard. "Set course for the heart of the Nexus. We'll breach it from within, disable their command center, and leave them with nothing. We hit fast, and we leave before they can react." "Understood," Sam replied. "The fleet's ready." The fleet slid into motion, moving in perfect synchronization, cloaked in silence as they neared the Nexus. They could feel the weight of the Empire's defensive system bearing down on them, but Hayes had one final ace up her sleeve. The Eclipse had been upgraded with an experimental weapon, an ion disruption cannon capable of disabling entire fleets in a single shot. The ship's tactical systems hummed with the energy it was drawing. They were almost in range. The ion cannon was their best shot at disabling the Nexus' most crucial station. And if they could take that down, they would cripple the Empire's command chain, sending its forces into chaos. "Prepare the ion cannon," Hayes said. "We fire on my mark." The tension on the bridge was unbearable as the fleet closed in on the Nexus. Every scan, every movement was crucial. The Empire's defenses were tightening, but Hayes was determined. She could already see it, her plan unfolding perfectly. The Nexus was a beast of bureaucracy and military power, but even the strongest of empires had weak points. They would find it. They would exploit it. "We've got a clear shot," Sam said, his voice steady, betraying none of the anxiety that was mounting in the room. Hayes exhaled slowly. "Mark." The Eclipse released the ion blast with a force that shook the ship's entire hull. A massive burst of energy streaked across space, and then the silence. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to pause. The Nexus trembled. The ion disruption cannon had struck its target. Several of the largest command stations, the ones responsible for coordinating defense and resource distribution, flickered and died, leaving the Empire's forces scrambling for control. "They're blind," Sam said, a grin spreading across his face. "We have them." "Not yet," Hayes cautioned, her gaze fixed on the rapidly changing tactical display. The battle wasn't over. But now, with the heart of the Nexus exposed, the silent Armada had a real chance to finish what they had started. The real war had begun, and Earth's fleet was no longer a shadow in the dark. They were the galaxy's nightmare, and the Empire would soon know it. The silence that followed the devastating strike on the Hyros Nexus was brief, but it felt eternal to Hayes. The Eclipse and the fleet had struck with precision, leaving the Empire's most crucial command centers in ruins, but now came the most dangerous part of the mission, finishing what they had started. The Empire's response would be swift, and with their defenses compromised, they were vulnerable, but they would not go down without a fight. Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the chaos unfold across the Nexus system. The Empire's fleet was reeling from the attack, their communications cut, their command structure in disarray. But the enemy wasn't defeated, not yet. The remaining Imperial forces were regrouping, pulling together what little coordination they could muster. The fleet would have to move quickly before the Empire could stabilize its defense network. "Admiral," Sam O'Connor's voice came over the comms, his tone filled with urgency. "The Empire's reinforcements are on the way." They've activated a war fleet from the Kidoran sector. If they get here in time, we'll be outnumbered 3-1. Hayes glanced at the strategic display, her mind already calculating their next move. The reinforcements were coming, but the damage was done. The Empire's infrastructure had been crippled, and their most valuable resource hub lay in ruins. It was now a matter of timing. She had to strike fast, before the Empire could retaliate with full force. "Prepare the fleet for full engagement," Hayes ordered. "We fight our way to their core. This ends now." The fleet sprang into action, moving as one. The Eclipse led the charge, its cloaking systems flickering on and off as it darted through the debris fields of the Hyros Nexus. The remaining Imperial forces were scattered, some still attempting to regain control of their stations, while others launched desperate counterattacks. But the Silent Armada was unstoppable. They had already struck the Empire's heart, and now they would finish the job. "Admiral, the Kidoran fleet has arrived," Sam reported, his voice tight with tension. "They're coming in fast." Hayes felt a surge of adrenaline. The Kidoran fleet was formidable, but she wasn't about to let them reclaim the Nexus. If the Silent Armada could take control of the Central Command Station and shut down the Empire's remaining defenses, they would win the war. "Target their lead ships," Hayes ordered. "Disrupt their formations. We'll hit them from the blind spots." The Eclipse and its allies launched a series of devastating strikes, catching the Kidoran fleet off guard. The sudden assault forced the Empire's ships into disarray, their once unified formations now broken and scattered. The Eclipse fired off its last remaining railgun volleys, tearing through the Kidoran warships with surgical precision. As the chaos unfolded, Hayes took a deep breath, knowing that this was the moment that would determine everything. They had fought long and hard to get to this point, and failure was not an option. "We have them now," Sam said, his voice filled with a rare hint of triumph. "Their ships are retreating." The battle raged on, but it was clear that the Empire had lost its grip. With the Kidoran fleet in retreat and their key defenses destroyed, the remaining Imperial forces had no chance. The Silent Armada pressed forward, moving with relentless precision, seizing control of every station and ship that remained in the Nexus. Finally, the moment came. The last of the Empire's warships surrendered, and the Central Command Station, once the heart of the Empire's operations, was in the hands of Earth's fleet. Hayes felt the weight of victory settle over her, but there was no celebration. The war was far from over. The Empire might have lost the Nexus, but they would not stop fighting. "We've won the battle, but the war continues," Hayes said, her voice steady but resolute. "Get the fleet ready for our next move." She looked out into the vastness of space, where the remnants of the once powerful Empire now floated, broken and defeated. The Silent Armada had struck without warning, dismantling the heart of the Empire, and the galaxy would never be the same. For the first time in a long while, Hayes allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had done the impossible. The Empire had been brought to its knees, and Earth's fleet had proven that even the greatest powers could fall. But this was only the beginning. The galaxy had been forever changed, and humanity had only just begun to rise. "We'll finish this, no matter what it takes," Hayes whispered to herself, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. And as the fleet moved forward into the unknown, the galaxy watched in silence, waiting for what humanity's next move would be.